Okay. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the Social Affairs Policy Review Committee. I'm Anne Call at MHK, I chair this committee, and with me is Mr Tim Glover, MHK. Today we're meeting with the Minister for Education, Sport and Culture and the Chief Officer of the Department of Education, Sport and Culture. Welcome to this annual oral evidence session. For the benefit of Hansard and anyone listening, could you please introduce yourselves, including your title and how long you've been in post?
Hey, Moramai. I'm Daphne Kane, Minister for Education, Sport and Culture. Been in post since end of February 2024.
Thank you.
Good morning, I am Graham Kinraid, Chief Officer, Department of Education, Sport and Culture, and I have been in post since September 2020.
Thank you. So, Mr Glover, start.
We start with quality assurance in that area. And can you just outline for us the process for an external validation review?
Good. Minister, would you like me or?
But just as an overview, it's on a 3-year rolling cycle. So as you know, we're now coming into the 3rd year. We have only 3 schools left to go through the quality assurance process with the visiting assessor, and that's Ballycotty, Doon and St Thomas's, along with the hearing service and the music service, which will be done in June this year. And otherwise, we've responded to feedback, so the sort of department level and public-facing elements of it would be the school undertake self-assessment. They are then assessed and quality assured. They assess annually, and they work towards a school development plan, and then they are assessed against their the certain aspects and outcomes, and Graham will explain this better. But the end of the process is a parent-facing report, and you may have noticed that these have changed in response to feedback from the old style report, which was quite narrative, now to very clear information for parents as to when the assessment took place, what they were assessed against, what the strengths are, where the areas for growth and development have been identified, and then clearly stating that those will be reflected in the school's development plan that is on every school's website.
So in other words, the parent-facing report, I think the criticism was it was a little bit school language, behind-the-scenes language, as opposed to for the parent.
Yeah, and now I think if you see the newer ones, I don't know if you've seen the examples of them, they are very clear, and I have to say I haven't had any feedback about it, only positive information. You know, people seem, and certainly from the school leadership side of things, the teachers speak about a very thorough, very robust, challenging process, but ultimately a positive experience in terms of investigating exactly how well that school is doing against how it thinks it's doing and the areas that it needs to focus on.
So you get that information obviously as well as the department?
As a department, we are made aware when the various schools are undergoing work, and in our sort of minister meetings, we get to hear the overview or any themes that are pushed up, and then obviously there is the annual overview that ETIO prepares for the department. We have been working through extensive amounts. The 5 priority areas that they identified in the first one, they are still being worked through, and we are awaiting the second annual overview, which I think is coming to the department in April.
It is.
Yeah.
Correct.
So how do you then track throughout the schools the areas of growth and development? How do you track that?
Okay. No, you pick that one up, Minister. I think, taking what the Minister said, if I just put a slightly higher piece over that, which is the concept of what quality assurance is trying to achieve. So this is about building capacity within schools to continually improve. It's very different to an inspection, and it's part of a cultural approach to how you would like the organisation to operate a continual improvement process. So with that in mind, the schools have an annual process where they will be looking at their priorities, looking at the areas they need to develop, producing a development plan, and that plan will come into the department. So the department has annual sight of the plan of each school. So we can see where they were last year, what they were working on, where they are this year, which bits they may have carried over, because you don't always complete everything in a plan, the best laid plans and such. But we have an ability to track over those improvement plans, where the schools are up to. Equally, we then get the ETIO summary at the end of the 3 years to keep a level piece across that and to bring a validation in from an external source. So we have 2 ways of tracking those development plans. But what we're building is a capacity in the schools to continually improve. And I think that's really important to understand the purpose of quality assurance.
Well, when we met last time,
Yeah.
you mentioned a new management information system. It had just gone live, if I recall, last time. So what does that enable you to do, which you could not do before?
Okay. It had just gone live within secondary schools last time, so it's probably been in primary schools since about 2014, I think, thereabouts. So it's a system we've had for a long time on the island, but we had 2 different management information systems until September. What it means is we now have one central point with all student data in it, be that behaviour, suspension, attendance, and various other pieces of data, rather than me trying to list them all off. Every piece of data that we're holding on a student will sit within that system. Equally, excuse me, that management information system brings us all sorts of other opportunities, so we can use it as a communication platform. Schools would use it as a communication platform to parents. There's an app that parents can have that can receive push notifications, can give parents sight of certain pieces of data that the school may surface. It allows parents to book parent meetings online. So it's slowly but surely we're wrapping all of the services that the schools need to deliver within one place. But at a department level, it enables us to run aggregate reports, so we don't see pupil level data, that sits within the school. But we could run a report to say how many children as of this morning marked in present in schools. So, well, in fact, I wouldn't have to run that report. That comes up on a little live dashboard when we run in. You have some live data that feeds, and schools have their own live dashboards. I could go on for a long time. It's a very powerful system.
Does it allow you to see patterns of areas of concern or areas that are really going well?
Yeah, and because the data set is becoming richer as time goes along, I think I said last time it will take a little bit of time for that data set to build before we start to do that, but you will begin to see trends, and the system itself will give you comparators over years or over months or over multiple years, and you can set your report to run over a data trend of the last 5 years if that's what you wish to look at.
And what does the department, what data does it have about overall achievements or milestones or exam passes? What does it receive about individual pupils' progress, or if anything?
Sorry, Minister, were you about to say?
We don't get the pupil level data, do we?
No, so the department wouldn't collate individual pupil level data. That stays within the school.
So how does the department then assure the quality of education being received by each young person is up to scratch?
So I don't know why I'm struggling this morning. So the quality of education is delivered through the QA process. So we can see the 3 elements in there around intent and implementation and impact. And the schools will use that pupil level data to inform their position and their decision as to why they've put themselves in each area of that framework. They will then feed that into their improvement plans. We can review those. And then equally, the QA will challenge that and validate that decision, so that we're getting to a point where our schools are very strong at being able to understand and know where individual students are, and to use that individual student data to inform the next step of learning. That is very much a role of schools. What we have to do is validate that capability and that capacity is within the school to do. And equally, we do have a team that visits schools. We have a consultant that visits schools and works with schools to challenge where they are, what they need to improve, and may well ask to see some of that data in that conversation to enable them to understand whether the school is in the right place of the judgments they're making. So there are multiple ways, in which we would be interacting with the school to validate that.
Just to widen that, we understand that the UK data about milestone achievements and exam passes does not directly map to the Isle of Man. So how do you benchmark to provide assurance about the value for money in our education system?
Benchmarking it is and has been a challenge for a while, because all our comparator neighbours all have slightly different education systems, as we can see with the white paper coming out of the UK around SEN at the moment, and the changes they're wishing to make to that education system shows how fundamentally different it is to our system, and therefore comparators can be challenging. Doesn't mean they don't have some validity, and we would look at comparators and hold where we are, but equally I think we need to look at our own trends internally, because that tells us something. But this is actually about individual progress of students. That's what tells you whether you're getting value for money. It's not necessarily about the end outcome, because the end outcome rather depends on where the child started. It's about the progress each individual child is making that is the powerful story to tell.
Okay. Can I just ask, you said this was on a 3-year rolling cycle, so
QA,
it starts again in September with the first school that was done, and you just roll it round?
Not quite. What we do is we say to the schools, because one of the purposes, there are many purposes of QA, but one of the purposes of QA is to go to the school. What am I trying to say? Let me explain this better. If a school had a brand new head teacher, that head teacher might say, it'd be really useful for me to have my QA now, please, so that it gives me a view of where the school is, and then I've got a platform off which we would build. So we would speak to the schools to see when it would be most impactful and most supportive of them, dependent on where they are in their development of certain priorities.
And Mr. Glover was asking about the overall value for money of education, but as a department, how do you evaluate the quality of the review process and the value for money you're getting from that review process, rather than an overall?
Yeah, and that's a step for us to do. So once we get to the end of this 3-year cycle, then we absolutely need to step back and look at the cycle, look at the output, look at and again, there would be many ways in which you would do that, wouldn't there? One way in which we would do, and I'll mention it because it's an ongoing piece, is every time there is a review of a school or a service, we ask for feedback from the school. So we need to know how effective it was, how supportive it was, how challenging it was, were there any issues with it, how was it focused to the areas that the school wanted it to be focused to. We would equally be reaching out to all members of staff if they wished. We go with a survey and ask, we don't force people to, but we ask people if they wish to feedback. And then we also work with our union colleagues to understand what's that feedback telling us, what are you hearing from your staff, and by piecing all of that together, we can understand whether we're walking that, and it is quite a tight line of challenge, but professional supportive challenge, not challenge that drives people into a defensive space and then we don't get the best out of it. It is a very fine line that you walk with it, but we need to pull all of that together at the end of the 3 years and take a review of where that first 3 years has been.
The feedback I've had from the school leaders is that this is a far superior system to neighbours across the water, and that if the focus and the ambition of it is to drive continuous improvement within our schools, then that's what it is doing at an individual school level, but also assisting with the overarching department policies to support that.
Yeah, well, I would say that from a committee point of view, we were quite pleased to see the improvement in the reporting
Yes.
Good.
method.
Yeah.
That it was far less generic and more targeted to the individual schools.
I think we need to, we're conscious we need to keep that under review. Things change, and I don't think we can ever say that's it now, we'll always report in that way. I think it's an annual review process that we would do like the schools do. We do of our own QA process. Are there any areas we can improve in here that we can improve? Because I think that continual improvement model sits to us as well as it sits within a school.
So we're just going to kind of catch up on some things we were talking about this time last year. So we were talking about last year the anti-bullying policy. So do all schools now have an anti-bullying policy?
Yep.
And is it a centralised policy? Is it the schools decide how they're going to adapt or adopt a policy?
We've set the bullying policy. The individual schools report on a consistent framework so that everything is logged, and I suppose there is a time when we're working up to everything being logged in a consistent way, but how the they report in a standard way, but they can vary how they deal with the various incidents at a school level.
Okay, and so what data is now being collected? Because you've sort of got a more streamlined format of reporting. So what are you collecting out of that that's useful?
Two elements to that. We have an island policy for bullying. Each school will implement, dependent on their community and their school, and may have an addendum to that policy underneath that talks about how the implementation of that policy then sits within that school, so students understand what the policy will mean there, and teachers will understand what the policy means in that setting. There are two ways in which incidences or behavioural incidences are caught. So schools have a very, we actually use the DFE standard reporting set now within the MIS, the Management Information System, around suspensions. So if any child is suspended, then the reasons why are recorded in a very standard way, so that we can report on that and we can understand across the island what suspension data is looking like, what it's saying to us, and whether we need to work with schools to address very specific areas. By allowing schools to nuance the behaviour policy within their school, then they're going to report in slightly different ways. So if I wanted reporting out of there, then I would have to reach to the schools and just say, can you submit your data, please? So that isn't something that I could pull direct from the MIS. And the reason for that is, if we want to allow the autonomy for schools to have that nuanced approach and to manage their own environments, we can't dictate policy from the top. If we dictate policy and force it to everybody, then you haven't got autonomy in your schools anymore. And they're two very different models, and it's probably a line the department walks regularly between where does that centralised direction sit and where does autonomy within the school sit. I think it is well recognised through numerous pieces of research that quality schools grow and thrive when they have autonomy to do so, but within a system that directs the direction they wish to take. I used direction twice there, my apologies. Does that make sense?
Can I just ask, say going back 3 years or so ago, what's the position now with bullying in schools? Is it increasing, decreasing? How big a problem is it?
I would say that's a really difficult question to answer, because I think that varies year on year. I think
Flare up. I mean, the schools I've been visiting, there was one teacher of a primary school who's had no suspensions for years, and suddenly an incident where there were 3, I think.
there were, you're right, Minister.
And students that they wouldn't have anticipated would be in that situation. But again, that is the school managing individual level, individual issues as they arise.
So you're telling me you can't see if it's getting worse or better? Well, that's the question.
I can't see it getting worse. I wouldn't sit here and say it's getting better, because you get fluctuation. Mm-hmm. So I guess what I'm saying is it fluctuates. And I think if we think about that policy and what it's trying to do, the drive of a school, and that policy would support them along with many other policies, is to create an environment and a culture within the school whereby behaviour is expected at a certain standard. What the data does is inform the school as to whether all of the interventions they're using to maintain that culture are working or not. And by looking at the data, you can maybe say, okay, well, I need to go back and change what we're doing here or change what we're doing here. So it's a constantly evolving model, and unfortunately, you can get flare-ups. So to sit here and say, oh, the data's going down, one school would say to me, well, actually, it went up last week. So it's a fluctuating pattern.
And do you use that data to look for trends or flags? Or I appreciate it fluctuates, but, you know, is it possible to spot anything out of that data from a department point of view?
Schools would certainly be looking at that data along a range of other data, and that comes back to the Management Information System. And one rather impressive feature they've brought in this year is it has an AI tool within it, which means that the school can actually start asking questions of the data. So can you present me a graph of the last 5 years of bullying incidents within the school, for example? Then you can just type it out, and rather than having to be a data analyst, the system will now do the data analysis and pull that data back for them. So schools will be looking at that all the time, because it informs the direction of the school. the department would only be looking at high-level data on that. I wouldn't be asking for pupil-level data up here. We would be looking for aggregate data.
Good, okay. So we'll move on to school meals. So how is the new primary school meal menu rollout going?
The food is exceptional quality, I would say. I think I've had 3 school meals now in different schools, and the feedback is quite mixed. There has been a reduction in uptake in substantial in a couple of schools, and the team at the centre continue to respond to the feedback over the menu choices. I would say from an island perspective, it is absolutely the right thing that we have increased local produce to 25%, and hoping we might see that build in the future. We're also achieved what was my ambition with the policy, which is to reduce the ultra-processed content. Now, increasing the fruit that's available and the salad bar, and that has been adapted in response to feedback as well, and the menu is continuing to evolve. There is, I think, a part of it is education, obviously, about nutritional awareness, healthy eating options, and some of it has been quite challenging. I think that what we would see maybe as traditional meals made the traditional way, not using any sauces in jars, not using any gravy granules, that sort of thing, but everything being made, has seen, perhaps it's not to the taste of modern taste, and when something's not what you're used to, then there has been a drop-off in some areas. And surprisingly, other places, other schools, not so much. But I'm hoping the numbers are going to stabilise. I think there's still around 3,000 meals a day that we deliver across the schools. And I'm confident that it's a really high-quality project, alongside having the glass of Alaman Creamery and milk. So I think it's the right thing to do. I would like to see more uptake, if I'm honest, in the future.
Have you been able to establish a reason why there's less uptake in certain schools than others, or is it no kind of pattern to that?
I think that would vary again from school to school, and it's hard without going to individual children and asking why. I think we all have personal taste in the food that we eat, and I would expect at any change of this size you would see a reaction to that change. I think the hope is, if we keep monitoring and we keep trying to understand, and we keep speaking to the kitchens, and we keep speaking to staff, and we can evolve the menu to try and get that balance between the palate of the children and what they want to eat, and the quality of the food that we would like to be serving.
It's a work in progress.
Yeah,
Yes.
but also they monitor the food waste quite closely.
They do.
One, to reduce, make it more sustainable, to check that if the portion sizes are leading to food waste before service or plate waste afterwards. Obviously, the fruit peelings make quite a lot of waste anyway, but the monitoring enables all the schools to be fully aware. They can identify unpopular dishes as well as popular ones, and we can do that a little bit on the ordering as well, because some schools have daily ordering, and some schools are able to allow children to opt in depending if they want that day's meal choices.
You do audit the waste.
We do audit waste.
And have you seen an improvement? I appreciate
it's reducing.
some things are
At this moment in time, the food waste is reducing.
Mr. Glover.
When this first rolled out, and now and again, I'm sure MHK's get a query from a parent. There was a query about portion sizes and whether children were getting enough to sustain them through the rest of the day, because a hungry pupil obviously isn't going to be as productive as a well-fed pupil. Has that been resolved?
The portion sizes are really carefully worked out. There is all the menus there's quite a long development time to bring on new dishes in, but all the menus go through a qualified dietitian. There is particular attention to ensure that any special dietary requirements are met. For instance, the type 1 diabetic children, quite often that portion is weighed and boiled for a set time so that they know exactly the amount of carbs in that serving for the child, because that's important obviously for the monitoring. But the it's around about 500 to 600 calories in each lunch, which is the amount that is the healthy amount for that child. But on top of that, there is the whole milk, the glass of milk, the unlimited salad bar and the unlimited fruit.
And you mentioned peelings. Are they just thrown out or are they recycled, like composted?
I would love them to be composted or put to good use, but I don't know on an individual level what schools do. I suspect that they are not.
Genuinely can't answer that question.
No, I can't answer.
I can find out.
I'd find out if any schools are actually composting, because it's, I mean, there's such an amount, it would be good to see that happen.
Good. Okay. So we'll move on to the department plan. Strategic priority 1 in the plan is to engage learners through personalised, collaborative and integrated learning experience for the digital generation. So the tasks to be undertaken seem to be all about AI, and we were just interested in sort of what other digital aspects children are learning about, because it seems to be very AI focused on that particular.
Well,
Do you want me to?
yeah, take the
So I think
area.
that's in addition. So that plan is talking about how we're going to implement the changes that we're seeing in AI on top of what we're already doing.
Okay.
So fortunately, the department is not starting from zero in the world of technology. My previous roles would force me to have to say that. I've been heavily involved in the rollout of technology into schools. So where you would want to see technology now is a variance of devices and a variance of platforms, be it iOS, Windows, Macintosh, whatever it might be, so that students are able to choose the appropriate piece of technology at the appropriate time in their learning to support them. So some students find it much better to write when they do it. Some students, I would be one of them, prefer to type, and some students prefer to dictate. But those are choices that they should be able to make, and we should make sure the technologies are available for them to choose the right technology to support them in the task that they have. Equally, we need to make sure that we've got a range of software available, whether that be word processors or whether it be online programs, or whether it be very specific programs to help children with very specific learning needs, of which we have a number that would be available for students to access, but again at the appropriate time with the appropriate equipment. The purpose of the actions in the plan this year were to say, on top of all of that, and there are thousands of IT devices across our schools, on top of all of that, what does the role of AI look like within education? Where does it sit with supporting teachers in preparation of teaching materials? What does it look like in the future for students and children to support their learning, not to replace their learning? And where does it sit in an administrative function within a school? I mentioned earlier about the management information system, and it including AI in there, just to make it easier for people to access the data that's there. So the purpose this year has been to get some training out across schools, to be talking to staff, to be talking to admin teams, and to start to look at what's the role of AI on top of the technology base we already have to ease workloads, improve outcomes, and support student learning. But that has to be done in an ethical way, it has to be done in a thoughtful way, and we need a policy to sit over the top of that, which we've just developed and will be coming to the department shortly.
I haven't seen yet. The AI in education's policy, that's the... and I think that there's a huge amount of research from other jurisdictions that you're looking at as having input to that, as well as across the schools. There is input into the policy, which then once I think your draft is going out for consultation with various stakeholders, and after which it's finalised and then it will come forward to us. But I think we just recognise that AI is going to affect all our lives, you know, how we learn, how it's appropriate to have in education, and also the safeguarding aspects of it, but also the benefits to teachers and education in the appropriate use of it to support students, but also to decrease the workload, I suppose, to make more efficient the teaching element. And it's potentially got enormous benefits for students, but we do need to get it right, how that is implemented, used in our school settings, but also for children to have the awareness and the education about it.
That's right. And, you know, use in education, and that's great, but is there also some education of children and young people about the dangers of it, about, you know, how to use it appropriately, how to be aware of the negative side of these things?
Absolutely, that would come through the ethical use. So when you talk of the ethics of AI, that's what you would be talking about in the ethics of AI. So it's important that children understand. I've clearly been around too long in this game, because I can remember all of these conversations when technology came into schools, or when computers came into schools, when iPads came into schools. I can remember an article back in 2010. And that's not to say any of those things were wrong. These massive changes in technology require real consideration, real thought. I'm not sure it's the role of an education organisation to knee-jerk into these things. We should consider it. We should consider the ethics. And when we start talking, we should be able to talk about the benefits, and we should be able to talk about not the dangers, but the ethics of use, the understanding of how every piece of technology can have a good side of the coin and a bad side of the coin. And children need to be aware of that for their own understanding of how they may then implement that technology in their lives. So yeah, absolutely, we need to consider ethical use.
Yeah. And your phone policy in schools, how's that working, and what benefit have you seen from...
Most popular policy I've ever been involved with, happy to say. The change in volumes, as we said, for the social interaction of students at break times was instant, literally overnight from it coming in. And I would say that after some initial, and having heard from students as well, after some initial resistance, particularly the generation who've always had a phone through secondary school, now to have that expectation that it is off and away and it is not heard unless the appropriate times, and also for medical use, obviously. I think it's working really well, and I'm sure there will be some infringements, but they're dealt with by the individual schools.
I would agree.
So from parents, teachers, pupils, it's all been a positive feedback from that?
Yeah, but broadly it's a positive. It's something that we would revisit at the end of each year, just to speak with that. We meet very regularly with heads, so it's certainly on the agenda for towards the end of this year to say, how's it been? What do we need to be aware of? Are there issues with implementation here? Do we need to think of anything for next year? Or is it just something that we can roll because it's working as we would intend it to work?
That's good. Okay, so just move on to the Education Amendment Bill. What's happening with that? Anything, or is that been finally decided that it's not going to progress?
The Education Amendment Bill, we are currently discussing at the department the white paper that was issued by the UK government, and they are giving that a 12-week consultation, which it has some significant of interest to us because of how we look at provisioning AEN in the future. So we're giving that some serious thought at the minute, and it may be possible, it may be going to happen that the length of time that's going to take for the department to get our heads around exactly the implications for the island and where we should sit. But obviously there are some measures in that bill that are important, safeguarding, particularly over homeschooled, registration and such. So we are giving it a lot of attention, and we'll know within the next week or so, and I'll communicate to members at the appropriate time what we're doing.
Okay.
Just going to move to all-inclusive education, and the aims in the 2022 childcare strategy included specific actions relating to those under 4 with additional education needs, adverse childhood experiences and complex needs. We've seen the childcare inclusion scheme being launched as well in 2025. So what's the uptake been there?
I think this is a really good news story, actually, for the development of services for the early years that the government has managed. Since September 2025, 38 out of 42 child daycare providers have signed up for the childcare inclusion scheme, and that they've received level 1 payments totalling £188,165 to date. So that's the payment over and above being able to make reasonable adjustment.
How many children have had the advantage of taking that up, really?
individual children and that?
Wouldn't know the individual. So each nursery gets an amount based on the number of children they have. I don't have the figures in front of me for individual children. But again, we could maybe get that. I don't want to overpromise, but I don't have it with us at the moment.
Don't have that
It
level.
was level 1 and 2, wasn't there?
Yeah,
Correct.
there's
That's level
2
one.
applications are coming for the level 2, which is for the children who are not able to access or participate at all in early years or education settings currently. So I don't know what stage those applications have gone, but obviously that's for the enhanced payment of over £8,000 over the year for additional support, either people, resource or equipment for individual children. So that's encouraging, and there will be a review this, I think starting this month, to see how that's gone and whether the schemes are working effectively as we intended.
That was my next question really, would be how does the department evaluate the benefit of it and the value for money for that amount of money that's been spent?
That's part of the review that will be undertaken and I think that the department, the way it's been rolled out is very much in hand with the childcare providers, so that they are able, informed about how it's going to work and able to apply for it, but also their feedback in terms of how well it's working will be key. But I think that in the various sessions, because the department meets quite regularly, and we heard that they'd had some really positive feedback of how it has helped individual children.
It is. So we met last with the providers in December, and we'll meet again. And I think that's going to be our most important method of understanding how impactful this is. One is uptake. 38 out of 42 is a good uptake from providers, but equally the feedback from those providers will make us aware as to whether those level 1 payments are enabling that extra adjustment to allow more children to engage, and then whether the level 2s are at sufficient level to enable those children with more challenging requirements to also engage.
Okay.
And you've also got the, as I say, the inclusive education policy. So what progress has been made with the rollout and delivery of the aims of that policy in the last 6 months? It's obviously in the department plan.
Yeah, it is. So I think the biggest step that we've taken in that the policy is out and the policy is within schools. The biggest piece now that we're running is the inclusive education training framework. So we've been talking about training to support staff in the implementation of this policy. Excuse me, that runs in 3 sectors. So we are making training available for staff, both as a WIBIS course at a high level, for all members of staff, and equally for SENCOs. So it depends on which level staff wish to undertake, but we're trying to get a broad piece of training in place so that staff can choose what's available, or not what's available, what's pertinent to their role and their requirements, all of which will support the delivery of the inclusive education policy. So it's important that all of those things sit together under the umbrella of the policy.
And when we last spoke, you also mentioned the COLI, or Continuum of Learning and Inclusion. How does this work then with that inclusive education policy?
So the COLI is best seen as a set of resources. So the policy will lay out what needs to be done and how children need to be supported. The training will enable staff to implement that, and the COLI is a set of resources that staff can access or not access. They may have other ways in which they want to support children, but it's meant as a bank of resources that have been collated by our educational psychologists and a wider team that will then support staff in the delivery of the requirements of the child within the policy. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. And again, when we last spoke, you said that a full additional educational needs review would be initiated within the next 12 months. And again, it's in the plan focusing on best practice and consideration of dedicated facilities. So is that still on track?
Do you want to take that one, Ms. Rushell? I'm happy to speak to it.
Well, it's one that I'm very keen to see happen, but I'm disappointed that we just haven't been able to get the resource to start that as early as I'd have liked it to be done, because it's a big piece of work, but there is an awful lot of other elements coming out of PAG review and also the ETIO review, the 5 priorities that were equally important, and particularly things like the school security element to get over the line. So this one has not commenced, but I'm hopeful it will start very soon, because this isn't at an individual level now provision. This is looking at the whole picture of future of AEN provision on the island. So, is it imminent?
It's imminent. We did have a resource to do it, and then unfortunately we don't. So broadly, we have funding in place to do some transformation work based off the Premier Advisory Group report that came out a couple of years ago now. This is one part of that. There were multiple other parts in there. The purpose of this is to recognise that we've spoken many times about the growing numbers of children with complex needs within our schools, and we strive to support. But as we see that number of children grow through the schools, we need to have a review really of our SPCs and our provision to ensure that that provision is correct for the numbers of children that we can see coming through the system, or whether we need to think of some rebalancing and repurposing of that provision in a different way. What I don't want to do is sit here and preempt the outcome of a review, but that's what the review is to do, is to say, is that provision correct at that level? And it's interesting seeing out of the back of the white paper that the UK have brought, they're having exactly the same conversations about have they provisioned support for those children in the right way. And I don't know how cited you are on that paper, but I read it this morning, in fact, not the paper, a report in the press this morning about the challenges the UK government are going to face of provisioning centres of support within each of their secondary schools across the UK. Well, that's a position we've held for more years than I can remember. So it's a really challenging area. I can see what other jurisdictions are doing. Our job is to understand what have we got and what do we need to do with that in the future to best support those children. That's the focus of that review. I do have funding to achieve it. I just don't have a resource at this moment in time.
Thank you. And also going back to the 25-26 department plan, a full review of the current equality impact assessment was underway. So how is that progressing?
And what that is and maybe the title doesn't necessarily give it the right flavour. That's about, so we have a quality impact assessment. The assessment is what it is, and we implement it wherever we need to implement it in policy intervention. What our review is can we train across the piece? So what we're doing is training our staff, bringing a group of staff into that skilled space to be able to run that impact assessment, and also consolidating the impact assessments that we've done so that staff can use that as a resource to understand and learn from. So it's just about broadening the breadth of our ability across the department to deliver those impact assessments when required.
That was due to be the target completed by the end of this month, March.
And I think we've slipped it by 3 months, have we? I think we've slipped it by 3 months. We're still going to deliver it this year, but I think we've slipped by 3 months.
And will you be able to provide this committee with a report once everything is complete?
I can see no reason why not.
So we'll move on to leadership really now. And what are the main areas of focus for the Education Council?
In terms of their roles and responsibilities, they look at finance, they review the department policies. So when we get the policies, we share it and we get feedback from the Education Council, which we've got a meeting coming up after Easter, I think it is. And it's a it's a very beneficial group of professionals from my perspective, who are the department's eyes and ears within the schools, where they're governors, usually chairs, not always, and they feed back any individual issues or broader ones back to the department. But in terms of the roles, there's safeguarding, the good practice over the recruitment and selection, the disciplinary procedure. Governors are training.
So the governors have a role at the centre to advise the minister, whether that be on policy or whatever the minister may bring to that group. They equally have a role of sitting on governing bodies within schools and ensuring a quality of delivery within those governing bodies, so that we know. So we've put a lot of standardised methodologies and paperworks and processes out into schools to ensure that those bodies are working in an efficient way. But then as Education Council members, they could be involved in appointment of staff So we need to ensure they're trained and able. They could be involved in complaints. They could be involved in disciplinaries. They play quite a key role within that school environment, and we have to ensure that they are trained and able to do that. And then obviously they are a link between the school and the department as well. They're another form of communication for this department to the schools that we support.
We meet every term with the group, the Education Council.
Okay, so you feel there's an independence in that, in order to provide that advisory role, the challenge, and holding to account, that it's kind of far enough away from the department itself to be able to do those things.
They will regularly bring challenge into the room if they wish to bring challenge into the room. Yes,
It's a two-way street.
Yeah.
The department shares policies and then discusses them, really, and then the council members bring the issues, or from the ground, within our schools, back to the whole council for discussion. So
And how are the governors appointed? Yeah.
we had a recruitment. I was involved in 2024. We appointed 3 members, and it's for a 3-year term. And then there were 7 members appointed in April 2025, also for a 3-year term. So we'd see. I mean, it'll be for the 2027. I suppose whoever's in post then will
3 months replacement.
refresh
And we
or extend.
absolutely. We go out publicly. We request applications, and it is an application and interview process.
And you have a role in training programme for them as they come in.
Yep.
That's good. Okay.
And not just as they come in, actually, Chair. It's a continuous
Continue.
programme. So there could be safeguarding, for example. We would regularly be updating.
Thank you. Now, when we last spoke, the education leadership team was a newly formed thing, and the department plan notes that they'll work with the department on the areas of growth and development identified within ETIO's first annual overview. What are you expecting that their role will be, or do you need to wait for the review to identify that?
I think this is really a positive again of the system that's evolved. So following those 5 areas of priority that were identified, the department established and got volunteers from the professionals within our schools to put themselves forward for a short-term basis within that education leadership team, and they tackle and address the issues, and then they escalate that to the senior leadership team. The policy's formed, and then it comes up to the department. But for me, it's a really empowering collaborative process from the education professionals and leaders within the schools to bring that element to the department. So I think that is then well received when the various policies then are put back into being in the schools.
Okay, so is there a terms of reference for that leadership
Yes.
team? Are they available? We couldn't find anything.
I have one with me, but I can equally send it across.
Thank you. It's just we couldn't find it published anyway.
I can make that available. If I may, Minister Chair, just add to that, there's a wider concept behind the education leadership team. I keep coming in here and talking about culture and talking about an organisation and talking about continuous improvement. And I think if we look back in time or look to other jurisdictions, there are different models by which a centre can work with schools. And it can be that you have a centre that drives policy and thinking and then implements into school. It's not a model that we're choosing to operate here, listening to the feedback from the schools and the professionals. There is a wealth of educational knowledge sat in our schools, right from support staff all the way up to senior leaders. We are blessed, to be quite honest, on the Isle of Man at the expertise and the knowledge that our staff hold. We are missing something if we are not harnessing that knowledge and that enthusiasm and that wish to drive education forward that all of those staff have, if we don't enable that to become part of the governance structure of the department. So the education leadership team, yes, they meet and they are working on the 5 ETIO outcomes, plus a number of other things that they feel are a priority. It means that the department, as we used to be known, are no longer seen to be implementing into schools. We're implementing with schools, and I think that's really important. But equally, it means that we're getting engagement all the way through the system now. So those head teachers on the ELT will then go back to their cluster groups and work with all of those head teachers. And through that mechanism, we hear the voice of every head teacher come back up through the system as to what change needs to look like. But furthermore, if we just take one priority, which may be around early years, that Etio have mentioned, what the ELT have done is put together what we're calling a continuous improvement group, or a SIG as they've become known. But that is professionals in our schools with a specialism in early years who want to come together, work on what the change should look like, do the research, understand what's happening, and then bring forward into ELT, which then comes forward to SLT, the change that they think needs to be made. Our job, come to the Minister, get agreement if that's what's required, depends whether it's operational, political change, and then implement that with the schools. And what you get is a fantastic system of self-improvement driven by the very people who are delivering. So it's taken a long time to build, I will grant that. I've been here 5 years. But you're trying to build for longevity. You're not trying to just make a knee-jerk, change something and hope that it fits. It's been a case of holding our nerve through this, with quality assurance being part of supporting that improvement. ELT is about growing that from the ground up. It's about trying to change a system at a system level. And unfortunately, it takes time. I wish it could be done overnight, but it can't. But I think, sat here today, I think we're in a great place. I agree, Minister. I think ELT is a really, really positive, and I thank everybody on ELT and everybody on the SIGs, because these are staff giving up their time to improve a system that they believe so strongly in.
Thank you. So we move on. The iThrive. So how well embedded is the iThrive framework now? Can you give us an update on how that is working?
Well, as far as I'm concerned, in terms of the uptake and the numbers in particular, but it's a men's care service into the schools. It's not something from the department.
It is. So we sit on a number of boards that would be involved in iThrive, so that we as a department, we need to be aware of what's happening within that wider model from Manx Care. Equally, we need to understand what actions are coming from that would fall to us as a department. They would be included within our department plan, because that's how we track change through. Or what I wouldn't want is change happening outside of the plan, because there's a danger we miss it, don't track it, or can't resource it. So it would be included within our plan. And equally, we need to understand that the conversations that are happening within iThrive may well need to be reflected within some of our policies, and we may need to tweak our policies to ensure that we're achieving or aligning to that overall message. But I would say one of the biggest outcomes from the iThrive into schools is the talk service. But I'm sure you may want to ask us about that.
Yeah, well, firstly, in the relation to the department's work in connection with the suicide prevention strategy, there's an action for all schools review of PSHE. I can never get those right way around. The update notes that a personal development section was added to the inclusive education policy. Can you tell us more about that?
That's definitely you.
Is that definitely me? That's definitely me. So I think we have, this is wrapped into a much wider piece. So PSHE, as you call out there, Chair, quite rightly, suicide prevention, some of bullying, health education, sex education, drug education, all of the myriad of things that schools need to be addressing need to sit under that PSHE umbrella. There's a really interesting framework within the UK that we are currently looking at with a group of heads, because I think it would have merit here on the island. In that it would encompass the deliveries of all of those elements that we need to look at, some of which are coming from the iThrive framework, but encompass them and embed them within our standard delivery. So what do I mean by that? I think if we look into the framework and understand what they would talk about with suicide education is about mental health education, it's about understanding safeguarding, it's about knowing how to seek help when you need help. There are a set of skills there that we should be embedding into all of our deliveries in PSHE that enable children to understand their emotions, to understand what a positive mental well-being, mental health looks like, to understand within themselves when something is wrong, where can they go to for help, who can they go to for help. So it's not, and actually the framework will be quite explicit and say very rarely would you actually talk about suicide. You teach the skills that protect against that. What we need to be careful of as a department is we're not mental health specialists, we're educationalists, and we need to know when to understand the need to hand this off to somebody who's qualified to handle that specific incident. But equally, it's not for us to say that's someone else's problem. What we need to do is embed skills that enable children to manage that. I'm hoping that has made some...
So the emphasis there is, of course, on the pupils, but what support's available for staff to be able to deal with these difficult issues and topics, because it must have an impact on them?
It absolutely must, and I think I would urge staff to know when to reach out to a mental health specialist rather than trying to deal with those topics themselves. Very rarely would I expect staff to be dealing with that topic. As I say, we're educationalists. The beauty, I think, of the talk service for us is we have such a close relationship now between the school and that service that there's an instant reach in there. Now, I'm not saying the talk service could help that member of staff, but they could certainly escalate it and find somebody who could. But you've got that instant reach point into somebody who's specialising in mental health as opposed to somebody who's specialising in education.
Strategic priority 4 is to promote resilience amongst individuals and work to ensure that they have the skills and knowledge to make positive lifestyle choices. And this links directly to Action 3.1 in the suicide strategy, which is to individuals, especially young people and the community, are more resilient, that well-being is promoted and people have the tools to deal with crisis. The 3 tasks for 25-26 all relate to actions relating to sport. We were just a bit kind of concerned that all the actions related to sport. So we just wanted to ask really how you're addressing resilience more broadly.
Yeah, and I'm it's interesting hearing somebody else's read of your plan. They're very fair challenges. The IT one was a very fair challenge. The plan is written of, we know what the base is, we're adding this to it. And that one is a little bit, we've been doing 6 R's within schools for, again, longer than I can remember, which is probably more a reflection of my age than anything else. So that talk of resilience is a conversation that happens quite regularly within our schools, but equally within these PSHE frameworks, they're about teaching those skills of understanding yourself, understanding your emotions, how to deal with those emotions, when to reach out for help. And that's sort of where resilience comes from, is that understanding of self-monitoring. The sport actions are additions to that, because for some children, those sport actions, that is part of where they learn their resilience. Some children aren't sporty and they would go into the world of culture or other areas. But those are additions to what we're already doing across our PSHE model.
Okay. And PSHE, is there allotted times for that for children during their timetables? I mean, is there enough time given to those sessions?
Oh, that's a really... I'm going to suspect most people would always say we don't give enough time to all the things that we want to do. You could probably always use more time. Schools will handle PSHE in different ways dependent on their timetabling. Primary schools will have slots. Secondary schools may use tutor sessions. They will use various models. So I couldn't speak knowledgeably about how they're all implementing it at this moment in time.
As a department, do you feel that is given enough priority in schools, really?
I think so, yeah, only because I came off a call yesterday with a group of head teachers where this was a topic of conversation for getting on for half an hour about PSHE, implementing it, the importance of implementing it and implementing it well, because this need to build the individual is key. Otherwise, you made the comment about a well-fed, Mr. Glover, is actually a fair comment, but equally, if we don't build individuals well, it doesn't matter how hard we try to educate them, we're going to miss something key. So I think head teachers are very aware of the importance of getting PSHE right and bringing all of these things together.
And then the talk service, so there's additional support for children, because the level of referrals that the schools make is 34% of the talk service. And I mean, the numbers that we're aware of who are given that extra support, there's 570 total referrals young people from secondary school and 350 of the total referrals of young people from primary school. So I think that there is a level of support there that we've not had previously, but that is in addition to the PSHE within school.
You mentioned talk service. I mean, is iListen still involved in schools?
Talk service is an arm of iListen.
That's what I was trying to find out.
Yeah, no, okay, sorry, what should have been clear. That it's a branding they've brought to the service specifically that they deliver into schools.
Thank you.
So it's, sorry, Mr. Glover, it's part of the same service we still commission from Manx Care.
We're going to move to away from education for the moment. Just talk about sport and culture. We discussed the summer scheme availability for children with additional needs last time.
Yes.
And you provided some additional information which has been published on our website. Just looking at the use of Glen Crutchery pool, to what extent did the higher charges or the higher fees charged cover costs to the department for having the pool in use?
Oh, I've got to be honest, Mr. Glover, I can't answer you that one. I can get you that data, but off the top of my head, I don't have that with me, but I'm happy to find that out for you.
And you produced the Isle of Man strategy for sport 26 to 36, the 10-year plan looking forward. And of course, that includes hosting the Island Games, returning to their home in 2029. How will development work, facility upgrades and costs for hosting this be funded? I know there was some in the budget set aside for preparation works.
Yeah, definitely. So 2029 obviously is the target, and we are anticipating that there will be a great legacy for the island in terms of sport as well as infrastructure. So the organising committee is in place, comprising senior officers from Department, DOI, DFE, DHA and Manx Care, as well as Desk, obviously. We've got funding of £2.5 million to deliver the games. That's already been approved by Treasury. And then further capital spending is £2.6 million that we're looking to enhance and refurbish facilities at the NSC, particularly the athletics track, the bowl playing surface, and mechanical and electrical infrastructure in the main building.
Are there any plans for the athletics track grandstand?
Yes.
Because that's starting to look, if I'm honest, a bit scruffy now.
Yeah, I agree.
That was the other one on that list.
There's the athletics track grandstand. Work is underway in readiness for the games, and then part of these may come forward sooner.
That piece is actually kicked off. So the grandstand, we've got what we call PDF funding, initial funding to look at that. We've had our first meeting, I think, 2 weeks ago to look at what that's going to be. So we're moving that at some pace. 2029 sounds like it's a long way away, doesn't it? It absolutely isn't.
It'll soon be here.
It'll soon be here. And
when you've got an event like that on, it suddenly arrives quickly.
And what we need to look at is the timing of each of those changes, so you don't put your running track down and then go to do your grandstand. So we've scheduled where it needs to sit, and we're already on the first piece.
Is any work planned for the pool at the NSC?
For the 2029 games?
And in general?
No, we just have the outstanding issue of repairing the tiles, which we're dealing with.
Well, you've been dealing with it for quite some time now.
We have.
I have a question about it next Tuesday.
We'll find out more then.
As much as I'm able to say, you'll find out.
Is there enough thought being put into local sportsmen, sports people, while all of this is taking place, because they will still need to train, they will still need to hold their clubs, they will still need to do everything they usually do, actually probably to a higher level if they're going to compete. So how are you going to balance all of this off with your...
And that will be part of your planning as you schedule whether it's going to be grandstand, running track and 3G pitch or whichever way we do that. Part of the scheduling is saying who's using it at the time we're going to have to take the service down whilst we refit, and then where can we accommodate those. That will all be part of the planning phase.
Good.
Going back then to the strategy away from just the Island Games, there's a number of aims and suggested actions in there. Will there be an implementation plan to sit alongside those actions?
If they require it, not every action requires an implementation plan. It depends on how to what depth you're trying to implement something. Is there one in particular you're wondering about, Mr.
No, it just seemed a natural fit that maybe you have an implementation plan with all the aims that are listed in there.
Yeah, and I think, and again, it's just the way the department has tried to work over the years. So this particular year, strangely, as a city, it sees the end of our 5-year strategy. So 5 years ago, we brought in a strategy, and off the back of that, we then bring in an annual implementation plan. So you're absolutely right, Mr. Glover, we've got a sports strategy, and where necessary, you will see implementation plans fall off the back of that. And we only use that as a mechanism because it makes it easier for us to track and to know exactly where we're up to, and if things slip, we can log that it's slipped and why. It's just a very transparent way of saying, this is what we're going to do, this is where we got to. So I would expect to see plans where required, yes.
And how's the department supporting the year of the Manx language on the cultural side of things?
Well, we're very pleased about the year of the Manx language. The department is part of GBIN,
Yes.
which I think is the group of Manx language from across Culture Vannin and the wider island. And actually on my school visits I've been really impressed with the level of engagement. I was up at Bun School and also Bluff, and the Manx sessions that were going on in the schools, there's a lot of enthusiasm for Manx, and the department's also part of the I was going to say there's the new signage that's guidelines that are coming out in terms of increasing the amount of Manx as well as English on all signage across the island.
I would agree with all of that, Minister. I'd only add, only because I was in a conversation yesterday, and just as an aside, something came up. I think we already have a rich cultural heritage within the department, and I was speaking to one of our incredible individuals who organised the Folk Awards, and the numbers of applicants into the Folk Awards this year has gone ballistic. I wish I could remember the number. I'm happy to share it with you because I want to say it's doubled. But to put it on and to organise it was really, really challenging because the numbers of people wishing to engage is just growing. And I think that points to not something that's just happening for a year of Manx language, but it's something that has a rich history behind it within the department and wider across the island.
So just a final question for me, just at the minute, is we were talking about succession planning, and you have already announced your retirement, Mr. Kinraid. So really, I suppose what I'd like to ask is, do you feel you are leaving the department in a good place? Do you feel that succession planning is there when you're replaced? Because we probably won't get the chance to talk to you again.
I'm not welcome back.
No, I'm not saying that. In this role.
It's very odd coming to the end of a career, and it's very odd coming to the end of something, about 6 years basically, that has consumed quite a large portion of my life. Where do I think I leave the department? I think I leave the department in a good place, for want of a better phrase. I, if I'm honest, I suspect others are a better judge of that. My personal view is the culture is in a much better place. My view is all areas of the department are engaged, understand their role. I think the culture, the sport and the education fit together really well. It's a bit like a hand-in-glove department. I think they interact really effectively whilst being distinct and discrete in their own areas. I think the governance structures are strong. I think our planning, our strategies, our delivery plans are strong. Are there things I would like to stay and develop further? Yes, there's always something you want to develop further. I think I came to a decision that said I've probably done everything in here I feel I can do, and it's time to hand over a much better department to somebody who can pick it up and take it on again. And hopefully me walking out the door leaves behind some of the history and Beamans and such like things. Mm-hmm. And we start looking at a department that's in a much better place and can now move forward. I think with the engagement of educational leadership teams and staff that seem so willing and so passionate to take this organisation forward, I think it's in a good position. But there are probably better or other people who could make a different judgment looking from a different angle, I'm sure.
Thank you. So we'd just like to give you...
I've just got one question, if I may. I'd be very remiss if I didn't ask about Castle Rushen High School while we're at the final session here, because my view is that we've got closer than ever. Are we going to get this over the line?
I would have to say it's in the hands of contractors going out. We're out for tender. That's got a couple of weeks. It will depend how efficiently how that tender goes and how efficiently that can go through the processes that obviously on such a major capital scheme will be required. But I agree, I think it's come further than ever. Even if it isn't possible to get it over the line by summer, the plans and the development of the scheme and where it's got to, I would hope it would be following soon after, if not this summer.
Is that your view as well?
Yeah, I think we will know more, Mr. Glover, when we get to the end of the current process, and we have a price in front of us and we understand what cost of this is going to look like, and then there will be a decision to be made. But do I feel comfortable that we've gotten to a much firmer place? Yes. We understand the scope better, we are moving towards design, and hopefully soon we will understand price, and then a proper conversation can be had.
And off the back of that, from a Douglas perspective, the decision's been taken to put a new school onto Park Road. When are we likely to see some initial plans for that?
So
plans, I appreciate the money's a different thing.
Money's a different thing. So our first step in that is to apply for PDF funding, which we've applied for, and that the project development fund is the funding that enables us to do exactly that, to then actually go out and start to put together a plan. It was the work that kicked off Castle Rushen was from a PDF fund. So absolutely, it's in play. We have the PDF bid in, and as soon as we get the funding to do, then we can start to do the work on what the scope would look like, and then we can start to get some realistic views of what delivery would look like.
Thank you. So now we'd like to give you the opportunity to tell us anything that we've missed out or anything that you'd like to add.
I've got one, actually, but thank you first of all for at this session this morning, and actually it's been quite refreshing to be able to talk about some of the achievements and the developments that we've tracked over the various years to the point where we are today. So thank you for the session and for accommodating the rescheduling in particular. And just, I think, as we've reflected in today's conversation, you can see that the department now is in a culture that is grounded in the values of respect, integrity, caring, fairness and trust. And they're not just words, they are what we are embedding every day in everything we do as a department. And I think, although everything hasn't happened on the time scale that we initially put in, and the ambition is probably not being matched by the progress that we've been able to make with the department plan and some of those strategic priorities that we're delivering. But it all is working towards the lifelong learning and development. And actually, I think we can look back with some pride at the achievements that we have made across education, sport, youth, and culture. So, and I have to say, to pay tribute to all the teams within the department, resilience of students as well, and young people, but the strength of the partnerships that we've got across all those elements of the department. But if you would indulge me, I do have some key achievements that I, particularly in this position that I've been privileged to hold for a couple of years, other than the ones you've mentioned, key elements I think that really develop the department and those partnerships with strengthened educational leadership by the education leadership team. And I think that does speak to the new culture that we have, and that has been a real benefit, that policies are developed that are fit for and bespoke to our island, and then they're worked up, and then they're not imposed, but they're implemented from the people who drew up those strategies or policies. And I think that's a real positive in our education system, enabling school leaders with their experience shaping the policy, planning and delivery, and we are empowering leaders at all levels and fostering that continuous improvement. And again, building on that inclusive collaboration and the stronger connections between schools and central leadership. And I think one of the things that we've not touched on in particular, but to my mind, coming into it as a non-education professional, but as a parent and somebody who's had children go through the system, one of the most significant improvements to delivering the education is committing to a balanced system where formative assessment is driving day-to-day teaching and feedback, standardised assessments providing reliable snapshots to inform the curriculum, planning and accountability. So alongside the quality assurance framework, I think we are building consistency across the schools. For instance, to strengthen literacy outcomes, the Common Literacy Framework for approximately 6,000 Key Stage 1 and 2 students has been introduced. So the framework tracks the reading, writing, speaking and listening, giving teachers consistent tools and then the data to personalise that learning and support each child effectively. And this is setting clear end-of-year expectations from year 1 to year 6 within primary, helping learners master the key skills and concepts that they need to be able to progress, embedding that learning securely, making steady progress year on year. And then that is one of the ETIO 5 priorities that was identified was ensuring a smooth transition into secondary. And the point about this literacy entitlement and the framework that we've set across the consistency is being extended into year 7. And then frameworks additionally are being piloted across some schools this year in maths and science, and they're going to go throughout Key Stage 1 and 2 and then again into Key Stage 3. And I think that is fundamentally beneficial for the whole island in terms of supporting students to reach the expected level and then to give them the essential tools to progress to the future levels. We've touched on the inclusive education policy, the childcare inclusion scheme, which I do think are really hugely beneficial. Something that I reflect with pride on, having sat on that side of the table, and I think something the committee can take a bit of credit for, is that we as a department supporting the fluoride varnish programme that has just been launched within our schools. So we're coordinating space, the timetabling, the consent process with Manx Care and public health colleagues so that preventative oral health support reaches the children who need it. So I think that that's a real positive, because you do sit in this job and think, what do we actually achieve and where are we getting? But I think I am really pleased to see that, and it was great to go up to Ballaugh School and be part of the launch and see something physically happening, and that can only, I feel, have benefits that are into the future for the individuals and for the islands, hopefully the overall health of the future. So as we've heard, needs are changing, and education is continuing to adapt and improve. One thing we didn't touch on, and I just do want to give a plug because I think this is of benefit, when we talked about the Glencrutchery Pool, for instance, and there has been that aspect of some children accessing holiday schemes, for instance. And I don't know if you've seen the Easter school holiday activities with the head of sport. I met with, I suppose, stakeholders, but representative group, and about those issues of placements and appropriate summer and Easter holiday schemes. But as a result of that, this is a special dedicated activity sessions for children and young people with additional learning or developmental needs, and it includes specific sessions for Dragon's Castle, multi-sports, outdoor learning centre, the NSC swim fun sessions, crafts, and I just think, and there's even a Peel Youth Club one, and I just think that working in partnership with the people representing a particular group. It'd be really interesting to see the uptake for these over the Easter holidays, and hopefully to continue to build on that.
I don't want to interrupt you, but are those department-specific activities, or are you in collaboration with charities in the third sector? How are those particular sessions?
These are across the department in the same way that the Easter holiday sports schemes are run. These will be dedicated sessions for a cohort that hasn't previously been able to be accommodated.
It's
provided
an extension
by
of our usual
the
offering, provided by education, sport and culture.
Okay, and just another quick one. Are parents or carers able to leave?
That will depend on the child.
Session dependent. So as we're working with representatives to understand where that may or may not be possible, but in a lot of these sessions it isn't possible. You do need parents to stay, but that's very clear on the programme what the expectations of each session are.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry.
So if just a few more highlights, because you can tell the huge range of really good work and progress that's being made by the department. We've touched on a couple of the school developments. Along with those, we've mentioned Castle Rushen High School, Park Road. There's also the QE2 STEM block, and actually we have submitted a planning application for the Henry Bloom Noble School extension, which will be very much needed. So we look forward to that going through the process. We've expanded leadership development. Another major plus, I think, in the last few years has seen significantly more leadership development, professional development for head teachers, deputies and middle leaders in terms of the growing the future management. The revitalisation of the Outdoor Learning Centre, don't know if you've seen it, but the facility there, and the couple of times I've been up and seen the Duke of Edinburgh award teams, but also the facility in the bunkhouse as well as the outdoor puzzles, and that is also doing really good work with students who need a focused series of sessions at the Outdoor Learning Centre. It's a fantastic facility that we are able to have on the island. We've got, obviously in the last year, we had Sir Mark Cavendish Raceway open, and that's inspiring the sports people of the future. We've also had really excellent participation into the Manx Youth Games that continue to deliver that sport at grassroots level, and then, as we've mentioned, securing the hosting of the Island Games 2029, which is going to deliver more legacy for the island. We've got, not to forget, the arts, really vibrant arts ecology on the island. The Arts Council's just finished the 60th anniversary programme. We got Villa Gaiety audiences topping 228,000, and obviously celebrating the Gaiety Theatre's 125th year with significant capital upgrades of over £1 million spend, particularly in the sound and lighting of both the Villa and the Gaiety. We're strengthening the pathways to further study and work, including renewed university partnerships, apprenticeships and employability initiatives. And obviously we've had a refresh to the Student Awards scheme as well, extending the offering to particularly the home studying students. And that is really going down well for people who want to stay on the island. STEM Fest, we had over 800 students and 25 organisations showcasing STEM learning. We've got the Young Workforce Scheme, the Jersey Youth Exchange for young leaders. That's been really positive. And as we mentioned, the year of the Manx language, hopefully boosting support and awareness and engagement in Manx language, community identity, creativity across 5 themes. And again, that should have a lasting legacy. So I suppose to sum up, we've recognised the increasing complexity of additional needs and the wider social pressures facing children and young people. Our education system is adapting to the need by investing in inclusion, well-being and targeted support so that every learner can thrive, whatever their starting point. While we accept there is more to do, we are moving forward with purpose, strengthening people, places, inclusion and quality, ensuring that education, sport, youth and culture continue to provide opportunity, well-being and community for our island. Together, we are building a system where every child, young person and lifelong learner can thrive and learn for life. And as we've touched on, this year is the final year of the 5-year strategy that was put in place following the Beamans report, which I know Mrs. Collett will remember well, as do I. And I think it's key, we touched on it before, Graham has been a key element in seeing where the culture was 5 years ago when it was identified in the Beamans report that change was required. So I would just like to pay tribute to Graham Carade to say he has been at the helm and has seen that culture of the whole organisation shift. And I would agree that there's been collaborative empowerment is now at the essence of what the department delivers, and I agree the department's in a much better place now certainly than it was after following that Beamans review.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, well, that just leaves us to thank you for coming today and answering our questions, and the committee will